Welcome back to PPCM's Painful Truth. Today's guest, Megan Lynch.
Thank you, Megan, for just like your time today and, just expressing to me how this disease that has peripartum cardiomyopathy, PPCM, has affected you. And I know that I first want to start off by saying, I read, a little bit about your pregnancies, and I just want to say I'm with like my whole heart. I just my sympathy and of from your loss. It's just so sad. It really tugs on my heartstrings, and I'm grateful for you to talk to everybody about your experience with this. Um, Tell me where do you live, like in what state, and when were you first diagnosed peripartum cardiomyopathy, at what age?
So I live in Minnesota, and I was diagnosed at 33.
And at what point in your pregnancy were you diagnosed peripartum cardiomyopathy?
5 days postpartum.
And who was it that diagnosed you? Was it a cardiologist or a gynecologist?
Neither. It was a radiologist.
Interesting. A radiologist. Was that from the ER?
No, I'd gone in because I thought I had pneumonia or anemia, and so I'd gone into a primary visit, and they did labs, and everything was normal. So they wanted me to do a CT to check for a blood clot, and I was like, that doesn't make. I don't have any of those symptoms. That's not it. So I refused it. And then my husband talked me into it. So I did the CT, but the appointment they had that day was at like 4:10 or something like that. And the clinic closes at 5. Mm-hmm. So at like 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, I got a call from the radiologist who read it, telling me that the next day I should make an appointment with cardiology, and symptoms got worse that night. So then I went into the ER.
And what were those symptoms?
So just the 5 days postpartum, they suddenly developed where I developed shortness of breath that just progressively got worse. And then that night I had orthopnea, or shortness of breath, when laying down. And that was really my only symptoms.
So, basically, what was, I guess, the radiologist, when he discovered that you were peripartum cardiomyopathy, what was the test, do you know, that he used that was able to diagnose you as that? And what from there, how were your follow-ups? Like, what happened from there?
So sorry, you cut out in the beginning quite a bit. I'm not sure.
Your radiologist? When he diagnosed you, what was the test or the screening that he did that was able to diagnose you, and how were you treated from there?
Sure. So I had a CT for a PT protocol. Mm-hmm. And then I went into the emergency department and told them that I had been called by the radiologist and that I had postpartum cardiomyopathy. And they're like, well, people don't usually come in with a diagnosis. And so then they put me in a room, and we in a waiting area, like a separate waiting area, because we had my newborn with us. Mm-hmm. And we waited for probably 3 or 4 hours. In that time, just sitting there, my symptoms of shortness of breath were getting progressively worse. And then they brought me back to the room, and the ER doctor checked me out, and they drew some labs, and then he never came back. And then the nurse came in, and she's like, okay, I'm going to put this armband on you and take you up to your room. I'm like, oh, does that mean I'm admitted? And so then they admitted me, and I was planning on just getting some Lasix or something as an outpatient and going home. But So I was admitted and put on oxygen, mostly for comfort. And then I was in the hospital for 3 days and got, I think it was 8 liters of fluid taken off through IV Lasix. And they did like the BNP and all that. And then the
What was the
day
number?
after, I did an echo.
Do you know the number?
I think it was around 5,000.
5,000? Okay. So, what was the EF with the 5,000? What was your EF percent?
25 to 30.
It would be,
They thought it was closer to the 30
yeah.
because I did a cardiac MRI and it showed closer to the 30 as well.
Mm-hmm. So basically, once you were diagnosed, it was post. It was by your radiologist. And then, you know, and then from following up from months following, what from there, what were the follow-ups, what were the treatments, and what happened?
Sure. So initially, when I went into the hospital, it was one cardiac service that was on. And so I got told, that, life is going to be completely changed. I won't have any more kids. Life expectancy is limited. And then the next day, so my second day in the hospital, it was changeover of service. And the next cardiologist was like, oh, you have a great outcome. You have a chance of recovery, but still won't be able to have kids. And they set me up with a cardiologist that specializes in cardiomyopathy, and they weren't sure what meds to send me out on. They didn't know if I should have a beta blocker or not. And so they had just started an ACE inhibitor in the Lasix. And then, so they sent me out, and the cardiologist that specialized in cardiomyopathy was on vacation. And so about a week later, I saw her and had a repeat echo. And then she saw me back, I want to say a couple weeks later, and then a month out. And then I think it was 3 months and 6 months, and then a year.
So when all of this treatment has happened, did you go back to your OB and let your birthing professionals know that that you in fact have peripartum cardiomyopathy?
So it was, the cardiologist said she sent it over to them.
To educate them.
Yeah.
Amazing. And I guess basically, is there anything that you would love to share, especially with women who are, went through this, what you went through, and, other preventions or anything from, we all have wounds of wisdom. We all have, every single woman that speaks, it's almost like we're putting the PPCM puzzle together, and it's not just in the United States of America. That's our American dream, to have a little bit. Yes, it needs to be, the diagnosis needs to be global, and it needs for standard global. But there are, our American dream is to kind of have, the free health care, and for pregnancy, when diagnosed with this disease, like, the women that have peripartum cardiomyopathy in Canada, they don't have that. Everything's free. Their health care, their stay, everything's free. They don't have to pay monthly insurance. And so, this is our American dream. But, we fight such a hard fight just to be heard during pregnancy that affects the entire family, and that these screening labs and testings that your radiologist did, that was able to, give you a diagnosis to be able to get treatment from there. What would you, what and what others don't know, what would you want to share that could possibly help?
Yeah, so, definitely requesting if you have any symptoms, requesting like the EKG and the pro BNP to be checked. As I mean, I work in healthcare and I've never heard of it. And so also, having more education to just healthcare providers in general, to be more knowledgeable about possible diagnosis, to not always looking for those normal everyday diagnosis, but to keep in mind that there might be a zebra in there as well.
Mm-hmm.
And just and then also, making sure you have close follow up with your cardiologist just to make sure that things are going as they should. If you need a life vest, to do that, or if you're not able to go back to work with them to try to get disability or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, you mentioned life vest. Did you have to wear a life vest?
No.
How many babies do you have today?
2.
You have 2. What are the ages?
So the one that I had postpartum cardiomyopathy with will be 4 next month. And then the other one will be 9 months and a couple of days.
How old were you when you first had your PPCM baby?
33.
So you know the difference between having a PPCM baby in your, pregnancy as opposed to a normal pregnancy, or was it completely different, or was it the same?
It was a completely different pregnancy. I mean, obviously I knew about it, so we were monitoring it closely, that it was a
Sure.
potential that it could get worse. I had, at the start, my EF was 55%. So
Sure.
excellent. But, with my first pregnancy, the one that I ended up with postpartum cardiomyopathy, the pregnancy was actually really smooth. I didn't have any issues during the pregnancy from what I felt. I did develop postpartum, or not postpartum, gestational hypertension the last week of the pregnancy. And then I had gestational diabetes at whatever point they screened for that. I was diagnosed with that, but it was really controlled. I barely needed any meds. And then I actually enjoyed being pregnant. I didn't have any nausea, nothing, and all that. And then my second one, so the one that I had the postpartum or post the postpartum cardiomyopathy, that one was a really rocky pregnancy. They think initially that I maybe lost a twin, and then I had a lot of bleeding during the pregnancy, and was put on bed rest for a little bit because of the bleeding. And then I had, I think, 7 kidney stones during the time, and then gestational diabetes that was just terrible. I needed tons of insulin, but the heart stayed good. So kind of everything else kind of broke down, and I had terrible nausea. I was vomiting nearly every day, and just a lot worse during the pregnancy, but then the postpartum time was much better. So if I could have combined the first part of the initial pregnancy and then the postpartum part of the second pregnancy, it would have been ideal.
Yeah. That's interesting that you felt more with the post PPCM baby than you did with the PPCM baby. But you were diagnosed as peripartum cardiomyopathy the first time, but you weren't the second time, but you had more symptoms the second time.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah, I had swelling the second time. I didn't have any swelling the first time. Everything, and my blood pressure was only like 2 initially the first pregnancy to be diagnosed with the gestational hypertension. It was just 2 points above the goals. So I mean, it wasn't like it was terrible hypertension or anything like that. And so it was,
even monitoring and all of that. Yeah. Are you planning on having any more?
no, I'm old
This is
now.
it. You're like, I'm done. Two and done. Yeah, three is the game changer, they say, right? I wouldn't know. I have one. So I thank you so much, for your time. And I don't, I think you mentioned like baby loss, right?
Yeah, so my first pregnancy I miscarried around 6 weeks or so. So nothing that would have been carried long enough to have caused the postpartum cardiomyopathy. And then a few months later, then I got pregnant with the one that is now should be 4 months or 4 years next month. And then with my last pregnancy here, that she'll be 9 months. They think I lost a twin with that one, so they weren't sure, but that's what they're thinking.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry, definitely sorry for all the losses. I know that the body is, as women, we produce, a lot of fluid. We have things that happen, complications happen. We should be a study. Women should be a study. You know, this, it's almost like it's so, the symptoms can be so broad, but if caught early with early diagnosis, it seems like there's a solution. There's a beta blocker, there's a drip available, there's a, we can see the heart, we can see the size of the heart. We have all of this technology. We have all of this, knowledge that's not like applied obviously in the policy and practice here in our medical community, which we hope for change. For I mean, this has been, now you're still a new mom. Your baby is 9 months, and I guess it's one of these these challenges that we go through after birth, where we always have to monitor just as much as our heart, but our mental health aspect of it, because there's a lot of depression that comes along with this disease that a person that had a joyful pregnancy wouldn't feel and wouldn't have. And I am a believer that when you have the awareness of mental health, and that is balanced, you can actually heal your heart, or it can also hurt your heart. They say anxiety doesn't hurt the heart, but I believe that naturally we would probably, with the trauma that comes along with all of this, and having maternal mortality, survival experience, and having all of these new concerns while we just have given life, that I believe that mentally, sometimes with the trauma, it's also chemical. There's nothing I knew that with what I went through, with my just everything, the cardiac arrest, the defibrillator, everything, just all of the above, all of the things that happened. I knew that as much as I wanted to be, I'm like this yoga, like gangster, like where I just would just love Zen, but there was so much Zen I could give myself where it wasn't going to help my dopamine and my serotonin to actually balance itself, where I, conditioned my mental health and met it at the level of care that it needed, and to be aware of the signs of my own depression and how I can cope with, this disease of the reality as being a new mom, and saying, okay, it's okay that I feel this because this and this happened. But then there's that fine line where are we, like, through this, this journey of coping with something that we experience that is scary, and how are you feeling, like, with your, like, these days? How are you feeling?
Yeah, so now I have postpartum um, depression, but with the first pregnancy where I had the postpartum cardiomyopathy, my mood was great. I was anxious later on when I developed like SVTs and things like that, but I never developed any depression, and then when I developed it with this pregnancy, it just kind of shocked me, because I was like, if I should have got it with any of them, it should have been with the last pregnancy. But
Mm-hmm.
it was, life just doesn't happen the way you think it should.
Well, I think that the trauma, you also had more trauma on the second one from what you were feeling, and that worry and that post-traumatic stress can definitely be traumatizing. So that would make sense to me. And to, and I think that it's very rare to come out of this without not having a postpartum depression, 100%. And, knowing that we're not invincible and that we are just, our brain is our main computer. I mean, I know how important the mind is. I also know how important the heart is. My mother, passed away from heart failure. My dad, sort of, we don't die from dementia, we die from heart failure. Same thing though, so I know that there needs to be not just awareness, but there needs to be awareness in the mind, because I do believe that I do heal my body at sometimes. But it took me an entire year with non-addictive medication, and gradually I knew what I needed to take. But I also have my master's in social work, and I used to be a triage specialist, where I would even like monitor and help people take their medicine. So I know that I know mental health. I understand that if it's not conditioned or treated like any disease, it will turn into a disease if it's not prevented. So I do know and understand that. So I do feel like when it's okay to like need a non-addictive source of medication. And if you start feeling fantastic with it on a year, you stay on it because it works for you. It's a chemical. It's almost like there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with me. There's trauma in our body. And how could it not affect other parts of our body? But our main computer, our brain, we are mamas. We need to be overcome a very valid depression. I mean, every emotion that we feel, every fear that we feel is all valid. But there's almost like we need the strength within to like every day to not have this define us, but overcome it and be, the best moms that we can be. And it's okay to, to want the medication, stay on the medication, and or even take that DNA swab that tells you the best medication that's for you and your body. That swab that you can request from your internal medicine doctor. And I don't know if you're on any medication right now, but how are you sleeping?
So I am on Wellbutrin, which causes me to have insomnia. So then I take trazodone so that I can sleep at night. But then that combination helps with the postpartum depression. So then I sleep well with the trazodone.
Yes, I'm on trazodone as well. I'm on 100 milligrams. I love it. I can't sleep without it. I try every once in a while, but I end up taking it anyway.
Yeah.
I had like night terrors. It was awful. What are you taking? What is the first medication that you said?
Wellbutrin was what was added. I was already on Effexor prior to that, so I'm
And
taking both.
that's a non-addictive long-term medication.
Yep.
Is it like a Zoloft?
So the Effexor is an SNRI, SSRI. So it has and a Zoloft is an SSRI. So it has a component of the medications like Zoloft. And then the Wellbutrin is in an other category. It doesn't fit into those. They don't exactly know why it works, but it does.
Okay. And how long you've been on that?
The Wellbutrin I've been on for maybe 6 months.
Okay. And so, is it what did your psychologist tell you that it works like where it takes a full year for it to condition the trauma and balance the anxiety, not the anxiety, but balance the fluid that is creating the depression in the mind?
Yeah, so they said, to plan on being on it at least 6 to 12 months, but that most women or most people, it just ends up being part of their maintenance therapy thereafter. And a lot of people don't go back to, decrease or get off of it.
Well, yeah, because why would you? Like, okay, for example, like, I used to, I mean, this was like many moons ago, but when I used to monitor, and the ones that were usually doing the best were on it the longest, but then they go off of it and then they go down in a spiral because they forget that they feel so fantastic and their life is so on track and they're doing so well because the medication works.
Right.
And they think, oh, well, I could just be normal and just go off of it. And then you go off of it, and all that time that took you to get to where you're supposed to be, whatever it is that's going on in your mind condition goes away like that. So it's like you worked so hard, it took that long, and it's like a workout, you know what I'm saying? And it's very much of mental health awareness. When they say mental health awareness, it's like we have to meet ourselves at a level of a major depression. And, we're dealing with loss, grief, just our own losing ourselves. It's becoming a new mom. We're in a transition anyway. It's almost like we're shedding the skin of as they metamorphosing into another being, is what it basically is. But then it's almost like, yeah, it's like a kind of like a butterfly, like caterpillar, but we end up like, I don't know, hurting a wing or something. It's with peripartum cardiomyopathy. And it's really kind of just sad because, the fact that, even with baby loss, there needs to be awareness that if the BNP test and the lab screening and testings were mandatory, then, in 2022, which we hope, no later than 2023, that way we can see if the placentia growth factor from the diagnosis that from the SFLT1 and the PIGF blood test could be provided, if that could really have prevented, baby loss, nourishing the growth of the placenta and seeing what, what type of, like we need a beta blocker if there's something that can maybe provide, that can maybe like, that could be so simple, and then, say the baby's saved, and the next thing they're like, I don't know, getting an award or being the next president. You know what I'm saying? You just don't.
Mhm.
I think about like that if early diagnosis saves lives with maternal mortality, and the same test could be applied, that they're, so early, it could possibly save a life of a baby. I mean, do you believe this as a mother that has lost 3?
Yeah, so I definitely think that if there was more, um, testing and screening, that it could definitely prevent more loss. And I think there's also a huge disparity between the races, and is thought that there's in African Americans there's just more susceptibility as well, but
Yes.
we also have you know African Americans generally don't have as good of healthcare treatment. There's whether you like it or not, there's bias in the medical system, and they're less likely typically to seek medical care or earlier in
Which is,
pregnancy.
and our American dream is for healthcare to be provided and cared for and respected just like the Canadians do for these women, because the struggle of us in America is real with this financially. I mean, and they don't have to. It's such a beautiful, it's like music to my ears when I talk to a Canadian, honestly, because it's like that's what we hope for, because they don't have the worry of of any bills for healthcare, for a vest. Why do we pay $5,000? We can't even own it. It's for 3 months, and it's a rental. It's entrapment. It's awful. And I mean, I don't know how much you pay a month for your insurance, but I'm sure your copays are pretty expensive, are they? Like, what are your copays?
So our copays are 10% of what the bill is if it's in network, and then if it's for prevention, then it's free.
And who do you have?
Then it's 20% of the cost if it's out of network.
And who do you have?
Mayo, MMSI.
And that's in Minnesota.
Yeah.
So, and do you pay, is it covered per month? Is it like a Medicaid thing where they cover you?
Yeah, it comes
State?
out of what was that?
Is it like state, like a state insurance, or no, you have to pay out of
it's
pocket?
through my employer.
Okay. So are your copays high? Like, what are they?
Compared to other insurance companies or other people who've talked about what their insurance copays are, I think mine are lower, and my monthly cost for the insurance is definitely lower than many others. But we also have, I feel like our cap that we have to meet is maybe a little bit higher before everything's covered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, I think that hopefully we can, learn from our words that what we are asking and what we are requesting for women. It's clear on what, you and I have discussed today, that there needs a lot of work to be done within, creating a system for just everything, for this disease, for the care for women, for pregnancies, keeping women healthy, and having the right training and education in our medical community, so then that way we can hopefully prevent more suffering and unfortunate passings that come along with being either never diagnosed, never treated, or just women who are just suffering when all they want is just a baby, so
Definitely, like just even grieving that loss when you're first initially told that you can't have more children, and then the conflict of information, just even between like my cardiologist that I saw within a 2-week time frame. I saw 3 cardiologists, and they all had different inputs and different outcomes. And so I mean, even within the specialty of the heart, it's still not known enough. And then you add in
devastating.
everything else.
It's devastating. It's to the point where I've been sitting back watching, observing, but I've been also working on the back end, to have a nonprofit. It's not like you can wake up and say, oh, I want a 501c3 nonprofit and everything. It takes a lot of work, and it takes time. But to build this platform has been my goal for like the last, while I'm recovering, while I'm grieving my parents from this awful disease that, they died like dominoes, like right after. I believe this was part to add to trauma. I believe trauma can create illnesses in families and traumas. Like if you have something that's sitting dormant, I mean, it's just extra stress, you know what I'm saying? And it just can create things like, with my mom, she had walking pneumonia, and then it latched onto her heart valves, and then she died. And then 18 months later, my dad passed away 4 months after my heart. So it was like boom, 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 boom. What the cause is, and the fact that it could have all been prevented, I, with grieving, like you talk about, I mean, everybody grieves differently, copes differently within this disease. There is no degree of like, I suffered more than you, whatever. No, it's like a pain is pain, and there's like no degree, but this disease does affect families. And when I sit there and I hear women that, post, like if your post or on the group site, and, it's like almost like there needs to be justice in having just to even educate others even. And that's why I felt like, okay, I'm ready to, create this podcast and docuseries because, the medical community, they have medical documentation. But what are our documentations? And we don't have any as women globally, but most definitely in the United States of America, we have so many more challenges than other women because they are cared for, provided for. And, unfortunately, our death rate is just so high that I hope that, with our conversations as each woman continues to talk and want to share their story to show and prove that, this is extremely common. It's just rare for diagnosis, and to hopefully have the diagnosis available in every office. And to be honest with you, I don't even know why they wouldn't want to, because discovering that if they were more diagnoses, they would make so much more money. They would like triple their money, because then they can make deals. Like then they're actually diagnosing women, and then you're providing medication, pharmaceutical. They're hurting themselves by not making they could gain so much more, billions and trillions more dollars if this was actually diagnosed. They're missing the boat. So really, FDA, the fact that they're not approving this, I don't understand, because it's almost like women would get on medication, we get the proper care that we need. That's more money through pharmaceutical. So it's really, I just don't understand why this hasn't moved forward, and it's 2022.
And even, we know some risk factors, but even with those risk factors, my only two risk factors were that I was obese and over the age of 30. I mean, that doesn't provide a whole lot of guidance. If they're only going to screen people at risk, chances are I wouldn't have been screened, because, half of Americans are obese. And, it's pretty common now to have pregnancies after 30. So, that isn't, it probably wouldn't have been thought to be actually a true risk factor.
Right. Well, point made. Exactly. Well said. Well, thank you so much, for your time today, and, discussing this, with me, and, if I would just personally, I don't know if we are on Facebook or together or not, but if we're not, I'll add you. I now know you. My heart goes out to you, and I'm like a phone call away. You have my number. Message me. Anything comes up, in your health wise, I'm curious to know, if you ever get your baby's BNP test number. Our babies are studies. Now that we have the awareness of the BNP test, it's good to know their number as well. I'm just curious to what the babies are, what is my son like, even I don't know if you do any genetic testings or anything like that, or anything that comes up. Feel free to reconnect and share, because I think that that's also another, layer of this disease that comes with it, as well as what we are learning.
And, there's such conflicting information, I think, because it's not studied enough, that, I mean, even I had asked my cardiologist, should I have my girls screened, or, do they need to be aware for their pregnancies? And then my sister got pregnant after. So does she need to be, concerned?
Absolutely.
And she's like, oh, no, none of those people need to be tested. So, it's just a definite disparity there.
Advocate. Self-advocacy. There you go. We have to even advocate for our children, I mean, it's like, how could they say that? How do they don't know?
But I mean, I didn't develop symptoms until the day I was diagnosed, and
Right.
my heart was already failing,
Right.
when it could have been screened much earlier.
Mm-hmm. I get it. It's almost as if, taking it a step further, it's like, okay, how would you not want to, that's why medicine's called practice. How can a medical professional not want to say, you know what? Let's just check it out anyway. We really don't have that much information or studies about this. You're actually a study, and so is your PPCM baby, so maybe it wouldn't be a bad thing just to kind of do the follow-up lab screening and testings, just to double check, as a doctor would want to, if I was a scientist and stuff, and I loved playing with, I mean, I would be interested. Wow, this is a new discovery, this is not, this is a new discovery. And I just find it just very, interesting that Survivors is coming together globally, and we are doing, this docuseries and these podcasts on this subject, and there's just so many of us. There's so many but the one thing that I would love definitely to see change in the United States of America is this of bills or legislations or the support to that once you're diagnosed with this disease financially and with insurance, no more entrapment, no more neglecting the necessary standard testings and labs and that need to be already mandatory. It should have been mandatory decades ago, to be honest, but it's almost as if there's, I don't know, I don't know. I always say, why hasn't someone, done something? And that's when I just kept saying to myself, well, I guess I'll be that someone. And then I would wait and see if anybody, and then, it wouldn't really, and then I'd say, okay, maybe it's, I'm the somebody. And then, and then it just came up that this is no longer, I mean, the death that happened at the same hospital, the same East and West Tower at where I gave birth, that totally never diagnosed me, left me to die, didn't learn from my experience. And on November 21st, 2021, she died. This actor's daughter died there. And, that's when I just said, enough. They should have learned. The high risk management blew me off. They all made me feel like it was my fault. No. This young woman should have not have died. And along with so many other women. And women should not suffer if it's medically proven that no woman should ever suffer or die unless she's never diagnosed or treated. So therefore, if we have no diagnosis in gynecology, when we're having a baby going to a cardiologist, why would we, unless there was already a collaboration, which now 2022 there is, because of, Dr. Watson, my cardiologist, and, me just every appointment and like starting this nonprofit and just showing her, bringing her, texting her girls and like women that are suffering from this disease and showing her that there's, it's not just women's heart, it's pregnancy, women's heart. There's a, and so I knew that this was something that I was going to have to fight with. And I did. It took me years. And finally it's connected. So I believe that, at some point this will connect, your story will get out there, as a survivor that, also had baby loss, where these tests could have prevented, and you believe, and I believe. And so does the labs at the IPAC research labs. They believe that, that it can be prevented, for baby loss. So it's not just for the mom, it's for the babies as well. And it's for the husbands and the men, because then they lose. And it's just sad.
Yeah. And even like, when I got diagnosed, I felt so alone. And, because it's, considered rare, you don't know it's not like you can call up your neighbor and talk to them about it. I mean, you can, but they don't understand.
Right.
And so like, even when you get diagnosed, if your cardiologist can even, give you resources of how to, a Facebook page or, other resources that how you could reach out for people. Because like the Facebook group, I didn't find until maybe 2 years after my diagnosis, which I'd worked through a lot of stuff by that point in time. But, if I'd known about it from the get-go, I feel like I would have had a lot more support and not felt so alone in the diagnosis too.
Absolutely. And that's also where, when you're diagnosed, every woman feels exactly how you feel. I felt the same way. Every woman, is like, okay, I'm an alien from Mars, and every person I talk to has absolutely no idea of this disease, what I'm talking about, doesn't care. And I'm an alien from Mars, and I'm not speaking their language, but I have the prevention and cure for humanity. And because I survived such, but nobody, it's like literally we are aliens from Mars. And when we talk to the average person, they can't even relate. They don't understand. They in every level of comprehension, whether it's just try to educate them the simple definition, let alone the feelings behind and what you go through.
Yeah, I mean,
It's
not
insane.
even just the diagnosis of having them understand that, but the understanding that, if you decide to have more children, there's risk with that too. Like
Right.
just grieving that loss if you wanted more children, or,
Right.
I mean, that in and of
Right.
itself is a loss that on average your, friend your same age isn't going to be experiencing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a very lonely disease, and especially during COVID. So how did that affect you?
So I was diagnosed in 2018. So I was diagnosed prior to all of it. And then my pregnancy, this last pregnancy, it was kind of after a little bit more had been known about COVID, but they still would allow us. We were past the point where everybody was in lockdown and things like that. So I could actually make it into appointments, but they kept telling me each appointment, like, if the numbers go higher and we have to go into lockdown again, you're going to have to do Zoom meetings for your OB appointments. And, here's your Doppler to check at home if that happens. So, I mean, there was, definitely risk there. I mean, I'm aware of my body and things like that, and I work in the healthcare, but I don't work in OB. Like, I don't know how to find Doppler tone, and it's not like they gave you a high quality fetal Doppler. They give you the crappiest one.
Yeah.
So, I mean, even just that, the fear that I would miss something because I wouldn't be able to go into the clinic.
Right. If something was to happen, you would even get less health care, even with the less health care that we're already provided, even less health care. And it's a scary situation with what we go through, because it can happen at any moment. I remember one doctor's like, this is your heart today, this is your heart tomorrow, and he's telling me, I'm thinking, well, same to you. Like, what do you, like, he's trying to, like, I mean, these doctors, they really, like, they make you feel like you're gonna die, which you can and you will, but a little too late, before it's a little before too late is what I've been saying. But no, thank you, again for your time today, and taking me through your little journey of all of this, because again, like, these are very important conversations. We always learn something new I always learn something new from each interview. So, thank you for your time and for also educating me on, your wounds of wisdom.
Thank you.
And yes, continue, and God bless. And I will definitely keep in touch.
All right.
Thank
You
you.
have a good rest of your day.
You too. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us and listening to the PPCM Fund podcast. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe. PPCM's Painful Truth is made possible through the generous support of donors like you. Help us spread the awareness by donating at ppcmfund.com, or click the link below to become a member through Ko-fi. Have a great day.